Let's start with Red Dead Redemption 2, a game that absolutely dominated conversations when it came out, but somehow didn't win Game of the Year. And I get it, God of War was a beast in 2018, but let's be honest, Red Dead Redemption 2 was something else. This was a game that didn't just tell a story, it lived and breathed one. The world Rockstar created in Red Dead Redemption 2 was so immersive, it felt like the Old West was right there in front of you. And the detail? Insane. You could spend hours just wandering around, hunting, fishing, getting into random encounters. And every part of it felt like it was happening in real time. Rockstar nailed the atmosphere, from the dynamic weather to how towns felt alive. Even your horse had personality. People get so attached to their horses like it's a real companion. Now, the story is where the game really shines. Arthur Morgan? Easily one of the most complex, well-written characters in gaming. His whole journey of redemption, loyalty, and questioning his place in the gang gave players an emotional roller coaster. The game nailed that perfect blend of realism and fun. The way the world reacts to your choices, whether you're being honorable or wreaking havoc, makes every playthrough feel personal and unique. In the end, Red Dead Redemption 2 deserved all the praise and then some. It was more than just a game. It was an experience. The fact that it didn't win Game of the Year is still something people talk about because it left such a lasting impact. Next, we have Dark Souls 3. This game is like a test of your patience, skill, and determination, but in the most rewarding way. It's tough, no doubt about it, but that's what makes it so satisfying. If you're into games that push you, Dark Souls 3 is an experience you won't forget. First off, the world. The atmosphere in this game is just something else. Every area feels heavy with history, like the ruins and castles you walk through have seen centuries of battles and chaos. There's this haunting beauty to it, you know? You're walking through these desolate, crumbling places, but at the same time, they're gorgeous. It really pulls you in, like you just want to explore every corner, even if it means getting your ass kicked. And speaking of getting your ass kicked, the combat. Man, it's brutal. But once you get the hang of it, it's like a dance. You can't just go in swinging like in other games. Timing, dodging, and learning your enemy's moves are key. Every fight, whether it's a basic enemy or one of those insane bosses, feels like a challenge that you're either going to conquer or get humbled by. One thing I love about Dark Souls 3 is how it respects you as a player. It doesn't hold your hand or give you a bunch of tutorials. You're just thrown into this dark, dangerous world and expected to figure it out. At first, it's super intimidating, but you start picking up on little things. The lore, how the world is connected, the strategies you need to survive. It's almost like you're part of a secret club where you learn by trial and error, and the payoff is huge. So yeah, Dark Souls 3 is tough, but that's the point. Next we have Elden Ring. If you love a good challenge and want to lose yourself in a beautifully crafted world, this game is a must-play. The open world design is just jaw-dropping. It's not your typical open world where you're just running from quest marker to quest marker. In Elden Ring, exploration feels so organic. You'll be wandering through this desolate field, and suddenly you'll stumble upon some hidden cave or a massive fortress in the distance, and you just have to go check it out. Every corner of the world feels alive with mystery, danger, and treasures waiting to be uncovered. The game doesn't hold your hand at all, which I love. There's no obvious path to follow. You just go wherever your curiosity takes you. It's refreshing to play a game where the world itself is the real draw, not just the quest or the story. You never know what you'll run into, and trust me, the surprises are both thrilling and terrifying. Combat, as you'd expect from a From Software game, is tough but fair. Every enemy can mess you up if you're not careful. But when you finally take down that huge boss after hours of struggling, the sense of accomplishment is so worth it. It's got that classic risk-reward system, where you're constantly weighing your decisions. Do you keep pushing forward with low health, risking all your runes, or do you play it safe and return to a site of grace? That tension makes every encounter feel meaningful. The bosses? Oh man, they're something else. Each one feels like a huge event. Some are these towering, monstrous creatures, while others are more human-sized, but just as deadly. Next we have The Last of Us. Oh man, where do I even begin? You know how some games just stick with you long after you've finished them? That's exactly what The Last of Us did for me. It's so emotionally charged. Like, I knew it was going to be intense, but it's even more than I expected. Joel and Ellie's relationship? It's not just a typical protect the girl storyline. They feel like real people with real flaws. I think that's what I loved most, how raw and human it all feels. You watch them grow together in this messed up world, and it's not always pretty, but it's real. Speaking of the world, the post-apocalyptic setting is both terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Naughty Dog nailed that feeling of dread when you're walking through those overgrown cities. It's eerie, especially with the sound design. The clickers? Man, every time I heard them my heart rate went up. And they're not even the worst part. The humans in this game? Sometimes they're scarier than the infected. But honestly, it's the quieter moments that hit me the hardest. There's this one scene with Ellie in the giraffe sequence that made me just stop and take it in. In a world where everything's falling apart, there are still these tiny glimpses of beauty, you know? It makes you think about how people hold on to hope, even in the worst situations. Gameplay-wise, it's super tight. There's this constant balance of stealth, action, and scavenging. But what I appreciated most was how every encounter felt like it had stakes. You don't always have enough resources to just go guns blazing, so you've got to be smart about how you handle situations. Next, we have Mafia Definitive Edition. Alright, so I just finished this game, and honestly, I'm still processing how good it was. You know when a game just sticks with you? That's how this one feels. I've always had a soft spot for the original Mafia, but this remake? Wow, they really outdid themselves. It's like stepping into the 1930s for real. First off, the atmosphere. I don't know how they nailed the vibe of that era so perfectly. The city of Lost Heaven is just alive. Every little detail, from the cars to the buildings to the music, it really pulls you into that world. There were moments when I just wanted to drive around and take it all in, not even worrying about the mission at hand. Like, who knew 1930s radio stations would get me this hyped? And the story, it's not just a typical mobster narrative. You really get invested in Tommy Angelo's rise in the Salieri crime family. It's like playing through one of those classic gangster movies, but you're in control. I actually found myself sympathizing with him, which is wild considering, he's a criminal. But the voice acting, the facial expressions, it's all so believable. It draws you into the point where you care about these characters, even when they're making some seriously bad choices. Gameplay-wise, it's got that nice balance between action and story. Sure, there are shootouts and car chases, but I think what got me hooked was how well-paced it all felt. It doesn't rush you. The combat feels more polished this time around too. And the driving? I never thought I'd say this, but driving those old-school cars was actually fun. Next we have The Surge. I went into it thinking, okay, another sci-fi post-apocalyptic action RPG. But it's so much more than that. The whole concept of this broken-down, futuristic factory setting is just awesome. It's gritty, industrial, and feels like everything is falling apart, which really adds to that sense of desperation as you're trying to survive. And honestly, the world building is better than I expected. You slowly uncover bits of the story as you explore, and the more you dig, the more you realize just how messed up everything is. Now, I've got to talk about the combat because that's really the star of the show here. It's tough, methodical, and every fight feels like it could be your last. But here's the twist that sets it apart. The whole targeting limbs mechanic. It's genius. You don't just hack and slash randomly. You're strategically aiming for enemy body parts. Want that awesome new arm gear? You better take it from your enemy. It makes every encounter feel like a high-stakes chess match, where you're constantly weighing the risk of going for the kill or trying to grab new loot. And the exosuit? Such a cool feature. It feels like you're wearing this clunky, powerful piece of machinery, and as you upgrade it, you can feel yourself getting stronger. But at the same time, the enemies ramp up in difficulty, so you're never too comfortable. It keeps you on your toes, for sure. Plus, the suit customization adds a ton of variety to the gameplay. So, yeah, The Surge is a gem. Next we have Resident Evil 3 Remake. Definitely one of those games that's way better than people give it credit for. Seriously, if you haven't given it a shot, or maybe dismissed it because it's shorter than other Resident Evil games, you're missing out. It's packed with intense moments, killer gameplay, and one of the most relentless enemies in the series. You've got Jill Valentine, who is such a badass, going through Raccoon City as it just falls apart. The whole city is basically on fire, zombies everywhere. And then you've got Nemesis. My God, Nemesis. That thing is relentless. Every time you hear him coming, that music kicks in, and it's like your heart rate just skyrockets. You think Mr. X from Resident Evil 2 was bad? This guy's next level. The thing I love about RE3 Remake is how fast-paced it is compared to some other Resident Evil games. It's way more action-heavy, and Jill feels like she's always moving, always surviving on the edge. The balance between survival and action is super well done. And there's still that classic Resident Evil inventory management, where you have to decide like, do I take more health or more ammo? I love that dilemma, because it makes every decision feel critical, especially when you've got Nemesis chasing you. And speaking of that, the combat in this game feels tight. It's satisfying when you nail those perfect dodges, and then counterattack. The dodge mechanic is probably one of the things that makes Jill feel so agile compared to Leon or Claire in RE2. You really feel like you're evolving with the gameplay as you get better at dodging zombies. Next we have Metal Gear Solid V: The Phantom Pain. It's one of those experiences that really makes you feel like you're in control of a tactical open-world espionage operation. From the moment you start as Big Boss, or Venom Snake, if you want to get technical, you know you're in for something special. The way the game blends stealth, action, and freedom of choice is just next level. Let's start with the open world. Unlike previous Metal Gear games, which were more linear, the Phantom Pain drops you into these massive living environments. You've got Afghanistan's rocky, mountainous terrain, and the jungles of Africa, each filled with enemy bases, patrols, and wild animals. The thing is, the world isn't just a backdrop. It reacts to how you play. You can approach missions any way you want, whether it's going in guns blazing or sneaking in without anyone ever knowing you were there. And the best part? If you get caught, the game doesn't punish you too harshly. You can adapt, think on your feet, and still pull off the mission. That freedom keeps the tension high and the experience fresh every time. The stealth mechanics, they're just so well done. You've got all these tools at your disposal. Decoys, tranquilizer guns, night vision goggles, and you can customize your loadout for every mission. One of my favorite things to do is use the cardboard box, classic Metal Gear, to sneak around or surprise enemies. It's so ridiculous, but somehow always works. And Mother Base is such a cool feature. You're constantly building it up, recruiting soldiers, developing new weapons, and sending your team on missions. Next we have Marvel's Spider-Man 2. If you loved the first two games, get ready to have your mind blown, because this sequel takes everything up a notch. It's got all the web-swinging, action-packed, open-world goodness from the first game, but with some seriously awesome upgrades that make you feel even more like Spidey. First off, swinging through New York again? Man, I could do that for hours. The way they've refined the web-swinging mechanics is just so smooth. You're gliding through the city, flipping between skyscrapers, and pulling off crazy mid-air tricks. There's this new web glider thing that lets you cover so much ground so fast. It's like Spidey's flying, and it's the best feeling when you're cruising over Central Park or zipping through tight alleyways. It makes you feel unstoppable, and you'll never want to use fast travel. And this time, you get to switch between Peter and Miles, which is a game changer. Both of them have their own fighting styles and unique abilities, so it never feels repetitive. Peter's got his classic gadgets, but now he's also rocking those symbiote powers that just feel brutal. You can really feel the strength when he's using them. It's like he's just tearing through enemies. And then you've got Miles, who's all about that flashy Venom energy. I loved how you could seamlessly switch between them, depending on the mission or just how you wanted to play. The combat, too, has been seriously upgraded. It's fast, fluid, and makes you feel like you're choreographing these epic battles. You're pulling off these crazy combos, switching between gadgets, and using your environment to take down enemies in the most creative ways possible. Next we have Little Nightmares 2. From the moment you step into its eerie, twisted world, you know you're in for a wild ride. If you enjoyed the first game, this one takes everything that made Little Nightmares so great and cranks it up a notch. The atmosphere is even more disturbing, the puzzles are more challenging, and the story, while still cryptic, pulls you deeper into this unsettling nightmare realm. You play as Mono, a new character, but you're not alone. 6. The protagonist from the first game is there with you, and having that companion dynamic adds a new layer to the gameplay. It's cool how the game makes you rely on each other to get through the twisted environments. You'll need to work together to solve puzzles, escape enemies, and navigate the nightmarish world around you. It's not a co-op game, but that teamwork element feels fresh and gives you a stronger emotional connection to the characters. The world in Little Nightmares 2 is just as unsettling as you'd expect. It's full of grotesque, distorted creatures that'll send shivers down your spine. The design of the enemies is one of the game's strongest points. Each one is creepier than the last, and the way they move and interact with the environment keeps you on edge the whole time. There's a constant feeling of being hunted, which makes every encounter feel tense and nerve-wracking. What's really great about the game is how it balances those intense chase scenes with quieter, more atmospheric moments. You'll go from heart-pounding sequences where you're being chased by terrifying enemies to quieter, eerie sections where you're just trying to figure out what's going on. Next we have Outer Wilds. This game is all about exploring the unknown, and it really leans into that feeling of pure discovery. You're a new astronaut, part of this tiny space program from a small, cozy alien race, and you're launched out into space with nothing but your ship and a lot of questions. And I mean a lot of questions. What's so cool about Outer Wilds is that it doesn't handhold or push you in any specific direction. You have this whole solar system to explore, and every single planet is like its own character. Each place is unique, with strange environments, hidden stories, and mysteries that just pull you in. You land somewhere, start exploring, and immediately find yourself getting wrapped up in something unexpected. The sense of wonder in this game is unreal. I mean, you'll be cruising along and suddenly you're uncovering secrets that are far bigger than you'd expect. There's something magical about wandering into these ancient ruins or discovering strange technologies from a long-lost civilization. And as you piece things together, you start to understand that every single mystery is connected, which is honestly so satisfying. One of my favorite things is how much Outer Wilds makes you feel like a real explorer. There's no combat or big flashy objectives. It's all about curiosity. Every time you figure something out, it feels like a little victory, and the game respects that you're smart enough to connect the dots on your own. Another thing is the time loop. It's such a unique mechanic that gives the game this sense of urgency, but without being punishing. It's like you're reliving this amazing day over and over, trying to piece together everything. Next we have A Plague Tale Requiem. It absolutely should have been in the running for Game of the Year, but didn't quite get the recognition it deserved. This sequel took everything great about A Plague Tale Innocence and cranked it up to a whole new level. The story, the characters, the visuals, it was all so much more intense. And honestly, it hit harder than a lot of people expected. First off, the story in Requiem was a gut punch in the best way. Following Amisha and Hugo's journey through a world ravaged by the plague and the supernatural rat infestation, you could feel the stakes growing as you progressed. What really stood out was the emotional weight of the game. It wasn't just about survival. It was about family, loss, and the lengths you'd go to protect the ones you love. The character development for both Amicia and Hugo was top tier. And by the end, it was impossible not to be emotionally invested in their fate. The game also looked absolutely stunning. The environments were jaw-dropping, whether you were sneaking through crumbling ruins, lush countrysides, or the plague-infested streets. The attention to detail made the world feel alive. Well, as alive as a world overrun by millions of rats can feel. And speaking of the rats, Requiem took the swarming rat mechanic from the first game and made it even crazier. The way they used light and shadow to control and avoid the rats created some of the most tense, nail-biting moments in the game. Another thing to consider is that Requiem came out in 2022, which was a year dominated by games like Elden Ring and God of War Ragnarok. Next we have The Witcher 3. It's one of those games that just sticks with you. I mean, where do you even start with a game like this? For me, it's the world, you know? Like, when you're roaming through those dense forests, or just riding Roach across a field at sunset, there's this vibe that's hard to describe. The world feels so alive, even if it's grim and full of monsters. And you know how in a lot of games, side quests are just filler? Not here. The Witcher 3's side quests feel just as important as the main story, if not sometimes more interesting. Like, you could be hunting down a werewolf one minute, and the next, you're getting involved in the political affairs of some random village. Every quest feels like it has its own little narrative arc. It's like playing through mini-stories, all packed into this huge world. One of my favorite things, though, is how the game handles monsters. It's not just about swinging your sword around. There's actual strategy involved. You read up on your target, learn its weaknesses, and prepare the right potions or oils before diving into battle. It really makes you feel like you're Geralt, this professional monster hunter who knows what he's doing. But it's not just about the scenery. The characters, man. You've got Ciri, Yennefer, Triss. They're so well written. Every time I made decisions in the game, I actually felt like they mattered. I mean, how often do you get that in games? Honestly, every time I play The Witcher 3, I catch something new. A bit of dialogue, a small detail in the environment. There's just so much packed into it. Next, we have Outlast 2. The game is a wild, terrifying ride from start to finish. It takes the creepy factor and dials it up so high you're constantly on edge. If you thought the first Outlast was scary, this one's here to remind you it can always get worse. First off, Outlast 2 does something amazing with its setting. You're dropped into this isolated backwoods area that feels like it's completely detached from the rest of the world. The story has you playing as Blake Langerman, a cameraman looking for answers about a mysterious murder, and, of course, you're not exactly welcomed with open arms. One thing I really love about Outlast 2 is how it forces you to use your camera to survive. You're relying on it for night vision in pitch black areas. But here's the kicker, the battery drains so fast. There's this constant panic about running out of juice, and when you hear something moving in the darkness, that dread just skyrockets. It's a beautiful kind of torture. Honestly, the camera itself feels like a character because you're always thinking about it, babying it, just hoping the battery lasts through the next nightmare. And when the camera dies in a dark place, pure terror. But it's not just about being scared. Outlast 2 does such a great job at making you feel helpless. There's no fighting back, no weapons, no hero moment where you suddenly become this badass. Nope, it's all about running, hiding, and surviving. You have to pick your hiding spots carefully, crouch through cornfields, dive under beds, and hope nobody finds you. Every noise feels like a threat, and every shadow keeps you guessing. Next, we have Baldur's Gate 3. If you're into RPGs or Dungeons and Dragons, this is basically a dream come true. The thing is, it's not just the story. It's the choices you make, the characters you meet, the dice rolls that can completely change how a situation unfolds. Every playthrough feels different. And I love that about it. First off, let's talk about the freedom this game gives you. You can literally do anything. Want to sneak past enemies instead of fighting them? Go for it. Want to convince a dragon to let you pass with just a bit of clever dialogue? Roll those dice. Or if you're feeling chaotic, you can just, blow stuff up with magic and hope for the best. That freedom makes every encounter feel fresh, and it's not just about combat. Your decisions can have lasting consequences on the story, on your companions, and even on the world itself. The story itself is wild. You start off with this mind flayer parasite in your brain, which immediately sets the stakes super high. And as you try to find a cure, you uncover all these other crazy plots and factions vying for control. It's dark, it's epic, and the world is full of so many cool little stories and side quests that it's easy to get lost in it all. The best part? You can shape the story in so many different ways, whether you want to be a hero, a villain, or something in between. The game doesn't force you down one path. It really feels like your journey. It's got that perfect blend of story, character development, and strategic combat, all wrapped up in this beautiful, sprawling world. Next, we have Deus Ex Mankind Divided. It's a sequel to Deus Ex Human Revolution, and it builds on everything that made that game great. Right off the bat, the world is what draws you in. It's set in a future where people with cybernetic enhancements, or AUGs, are treated like outcasts, and it really dives into these deep themes of segregation and oppression. You play as Adam Jensen, who's basically the coolest, most badass augmented human ever. He's got all these crazy high-tech upgrades that you can customize, and that's one of the best things about the game. It lets you play the way you want. Whether you're sneaking through vents like a ghost, hacking every terminal in sight, or going full-on combat mode with guns blazing, the choice is yours. The game doesn't force you down a certain path, and I love that freedom. The Prague setting is dark, gritty, and packed with detail. It's a world that feels alive, with all these little stories happening around you. Every corner you turn, there's something to discover, whether it's a side mission, a hidden path, or just some cool piece of lore that fleshes out the world even more. The attention to detail is top-notch. The story itself is complex and layered, dealing with conspiracies, political intrigue, and moral choices. What makes Mankind Divided stand out for me is how immersive the experience is. You get so wrapped up in Jensen's world. Next, we have Fallout 4. This game is all about exploring a massive, post-apocalyptic world filled with adventure, surprises, and the freedom to forge your own story. Right from the start, you're stepping into a world that feels alive. Well, as alive as a wasteland can be. You emerge into this beautifully ruined version of Boston. And there's this sense of mystery about what happened, who survived, and how you'll carve out your place in it. One of the best parts about Fallout 4 is just how much freedom you have. Want to be a hero, saving settlements and helping people out? Go for it. Prefer to be more of a lone wanderer? exploring every nook and cranny at your own pace, you can totally do that too. The game really lets you make those decisions and watch as the world reacts to you, which makes it feel super personal. And the combat, super satisfying. You can target specific body parts on enemies, which gives battles a bit of a strategic twist. Whether you're up against raiders, mutated creatures, or robots, every fight keeps you on your toes. And the weapon variety is massive. You can go from a simple pipe pistol to a full-blown laser rifle, whatever fits your style. Plus, there's so much to discover. Every abandoned shack, rusted-out car, and hidden bunker has a story, whether it's in the form of an old journal, a skeleton in an odd place, or a stash of supplies that makes you wonder who left it behind. Fallout 4 is full of these tiny details that make the world feel rich and layered, like you're uncovering secrets at every turn. Next we have A Way Out. This game really caught me off guard in the best way possible. If you've ever wanted a true co-op experience, like a game where you have to rely on another person to progress, this is it. And it's not just some side feature. Co-op is literally baked into the entire game. You can't play this solo, and honestly, that's what makes it awesome. So, you're basically playing as these two guys, Leo and Vincent, who are trying to break out of prison. But it's not just a prison break game. It's so much more. You get to know these two characters, their stories, and how their lives are intertwined. What's cool is that both players control one of them, and each player has their own unique perspective and role in the story. It feels like you're part of a movie, where every scene is intense and meaningful. The way the split screen works is genius. Even though you're doing different things sometimes, like one person might be sneaking around while the other is in a fist fight, it all flows together. And you have these moments where you've got to coordinate with your partner, timing a move or making a plan to escape or fight. And when you pull it off, it feels so satisfying. You really need to communicate and work together, which makes it such a fun experience if you're playing with a friend. One of the best parts? The variety. You're not just breaking out of prison and that's it. No way. There are car chases, stealth sections, emotional moments, and even a few mini-games that you wouldn't expect. What I love is how the story keeps building. It's not just about escaping. It's about the relationship between Leo and Vincent. The dialogue is really well written, and you start to feel for these guys as the plot unravels. Next we have Monster Hunter World, a game that's all about epic hunts, incredible creatures, and just a whole lot of fun. If you've ever wanted to feel like the ultimate hunter, taking down massive, fantastical beasts with a giant sword, or hammer, or bow, or even a bagpipe, then this game is calling your name. And trust me, once you start, it's hard to put down. The combat in Monster Hunter World is intense, but in the best way possible. You've got so many weapons to choose from, each with its own feel and playstyle. There's something for everyone. Whether you want to get up close and personal with a giant sword, keep your distance with a bow, or support your friends with a hunting horn, it's all there. Each weapon has its own learning curve, but mastering one feels incredibly rewarding. And the game doesn't rush you. You can spend hours just getting comfortable with different weapons and finding out which one really clicks for you. The best part about hunting, though, is that it's not just a straightforward swing till it drops kind of deal. You've got to pay attention to the monster's movements, study its behavior, and figure out when it's vulnerable. Every hunt is like a puzzle, and it's up to you to figure out how to take down each monster. It's challenging, but never frustrating, and every victory feels earned. You'll find yourself thinking, okay, maybe just one more hunt, over and over again. The monsters themselves are really the stars here. Each one is so unique, with its own behaviors, attack patterns, and quirks. You've got massive dragons, thunderous lizards, and even creatures that can camouflage themselves in the environment. Next we have Skyrim. Where do you even start with a game like Skyrim? This game is just huge. It's one of those games that just keeps pulling you in, no matter how many times you've played it before. You boot it up thinking, I'll just play for an hour. And next thing you know, it's 3 a.m. and you're sneaking around in the Thieves Guild or fighting a dragon on top of a mountain. First off, the world. It's absolutely massive and it feels alive, from the snowy peaks of the Throat of the World to the rolling plains of Whiterun. Every part of Skyrim feels like it has its own story to tell. And the fact that you can go anywhere, do anything, it's such a freeing experience. Like, if you see a mountain in the distance, you can actually go there. And you never know what's going to happen along the way. Maybe you run into a giant, or you stumble upon some hidden cave with its own little quest line. It's just endless discovery. The combat, well, it's classic Skyrim. It's not about being super fancy or fast-paced, but it's about choice. You want to swing a giant axe? Go for it. Prefer sneaking around with a bow or dual-wielding daggers? Totally doable. Or maybe you want to go full wizard, summoning flames and raising the dead. Whatever your style, the game lets you play exactly how you want. And speaking of choice, the quests are insane. Sure, there's the main story about you being the Dragonborn with the whole saving the world thing. But honestly, the side quests are where it's at. You can get caught up joining the Dark Brotherhood and becoming an assassin, or leading the companions and becoming a werewolf. There's just so much to do